All right, so welcome and good evening to lecture number 2 for building sector management. Tonight we'll quickly go through the makeup of government and basically the contribution of government to the industry, and we'll go into history a little bit just to see exactly how it works. And this relates to one of the questions as well, so you might be able to get a little bit of industry or a little bit of an idea of how to answer that question on the government. So last week we quickly had an introduction to the industry, and this is where we had a look at all the different types of projects that's really out there. And we also had a look at the economic importance. So we had a few stats over there to say a few things in the market went up, a few things remained stable, and of course a few things went down. And Tim, you reckon the Campbell Newman, he's been in the news quite a lot recently, so we'll see exactly. He reckons there's absolute no corruption in the government at all in Queensland, and it's very transparent. So Tim, you might want to give us your opinion on that, if you agree or not agree with that. So at any time, just add that in there. We also had a look at the structure of the different role players in the market. So basically we had a look at the clients, the professional team, who's responsible for what drives the industry. So we had a look at the private aspect of it. We had a look at the government's contribution, and of course we had a look at the industry contribution as well. So basically the mining. We also saw that mining and infrastructure, they really had a big contribution to the market. There's been slight changes. We see that there's roughly about 7.5% change in the contribution to the GDP for the construction industry every year, and that's basically that's been ongoing since about 2002, 2001. We had a look at the political importance, and tonight we'll talk a little bit about that some more. What you guys might want to think about is what the unions, what their effect is on the industry, specifically the construction industry. I think it's one of the articles that I posted for a chat. The next quick chat session that we have to do, I ask a few questions about the unions and why is it important or why is it not important. We also spoke about the social importance of the contribution to the economy and how much that adds to the country as a whole. All right, so what we're going to do tonight is just a short introduction to the government, a little bit of a history lesson there. We'll look at the different roles and responsibilities, and this is typically where one of your questions are going to be answered. All right, so one of the questions, if I recall correctly, asked you to think about the government in its 3 different roles. All right, so we'll have a look at that and see if we can give you a few pointers. You should be able to take a few notes and make sure that you understand it. We'll also touch on science and technology, and we're also going to have a look at the global initiatives for the industry. So these last 2 points are just basically give you guys a few hints, what to look out for. We don't really cover that in one of the assignments, but it's always interesting to see exactly where it comes from. All right, so any questions so far on the work that we did last week? Anything that you've picked up in the, let's say, the resource material? If you guys can show me a yes or a no, then I can see what's going on. If you don't have any questions, just give me a red cross, and then I can see that that we can move on. So thanks, Wayne. I can see you don't have anything. Julia as well. Also, all right. So it doesn't seem that there's any problems with that. So as I say, as we go along, just make sure that we cover all of that. All right. So if we look at the federal system that we've got in place in Australia, basically. It's been coming for a while. 1900, the Constitution united the different colonies. Now, in relation to the rest of the world, Australia is is still a reasonably young country. It's who of you guys knows which is the youngest state of all the states in Australia? Who wants to take a guess, or who knows? What's the youngest state in Australia? Anyone?
Canberra?
Well, Canberra is the
territory.
Yeah, well, that's the ACT, so it's not that one.
Queensland?
Yeah, there we go. So Queensland's the youngest of all of the states. Which is the oldest?
New South Wales.
New South Wales.
New South Wales, and there we go. Yep, New South Wales is the oldest. And the second oldest, do you want to take a guess at that one?
Be Western Australia.
Is it Western Australia? Are you sure about that?
Might be Victoria. Might be Victoria.
Victoria, I would have said.
Who wants to take a venture on Tasmania?
Oh,
That's not part of Australia. Sorry, mate.
Oh, yeah. We'll think about that one. We'll add a little smile there if I can get the smile going. Yeah, so think about that one. Tasmania is in there. Hobart's definitely, I think Hobart's the second oldest city in Australia. That's if you count Tasmania as part of Australia, but we'll leave that for you guys to decide on. All right, so you might want to include that into your little write-up to the assessment items to make sure that you get those extra marks that we promised earlier on. A few changes. Federal involves the division of powers, all right, so, and that comes down onto the states and, of course, the Commonwealth, all right. So if we look at the system, it's got basically two tiers, all right. So the states sits basically underneath the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth will always override the states. So the states can make their own rules and regulations, but if it contravenes a federal law, obviously it will go the federal way. All right, and then of course the exclusive powers, concurrent powers, and residual powers. So who wants to take a guess on what is exclusive powers? Anybody?
No idea.
Julia, your mic's open, so you have to answer. What's the give me an example of exclusive powers.
I have no idea.
All right, so if we look at that, exclusive powers, that's basically the federal government has that power, and only they have that. What if the federal, or if exclusive powers belong to the federal government, where will you put concurrent powers? Where do you think that will go?
State.
All right, so this is a mixture. This is a mixture between the federal and the state. All right, so whatever is not exclusive becomes concurrent, and of course the states now have a role to play. However, always remember that if the state makes a law that contravenes the federal law, it will always go the federal way. All right, and then the last question, residual powers, where does that go? All right, Kent reckons it's state and local. Yes, that's right. It's everything that remains. All right, so that's
federal,
basically
state, and local.
That's correct. Well, it's not the federal. It's everything that's not there. So we've done that one, and everything that's not there, we've done that one as well. So that's everything that stays behind. All right, so we'll talk about that some more as we go along. And this slide will give you a little bit better of an idea. There we can see there's the exclusive powers. There's our Commonwealth. That's basically Parliament. They're there to make the rules and everything. Then there's the concurrent powers in there, and then everything that remains and stays at the end. All right, so Brenton has just joined us. We might just pause here for a second to see, Brenton, if you can give us an indication if you can hear us. So if you can just give us maybe put your hand up, or if you can give us, yep, all right, so there we go. He's given us a chat. Thank you very much, so we can go on. All right, so there we go. And there you can see this is a nice diagram that will give you insight into how you can start your question in the next assignment, because it gives us the three different levels that we have, the exclusive, concurrent, and residual, and I also give you a few examples. All right, so these sections there, that refers to parts of the Constitution. So if you're struggling to sleep tonight, you might want to Google those and just read a little bit. Once you get to the second page, it tends to put you to sleep, and you shouldn't have any problems. All right, so those of you guys who struggle to sleep at night, there we go. That's where you find the solution. All right, so that's a nice slide. If we look at a few other examples, things that typically we want in the control of the federal government, our defense force. All right, we don't want 6 or 7 different defense forces running around and just duplicates the services. Now, if we look at Australia in terms of a company, for instance, would it work? Is it a duplication of services, or do you think it's the right way of going? Who of you guys wants to venture an idea there? If you think about Australia as a company, is it the most effective structure that we've got going? Anyone? And all that you have to do to give us an idea is just click on the talk button. The talk button was just underneath my little face, or alternatively you can just enter it into the chat window, and that will get us going as well. So if you give us an idea, we should be able to either listen to you or read you. Julia, oh, there we go. Yeah, there we go, Timothy. Yep.
Oh, Josh. Look, Josh, can you just rephrase the question again, please? Because you cut out a little bit on me there. I couldn't quite get all of it. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'll talk nice and slow because the connection is a little bit weird. If we look at the Australian government, we've got the 3 different levels there, federal, state, and local. If we compare that to a multinational company, would a multinational company work effectively with 3 different levels of control built into it? Right, so I'll give you another hint there. It's centralized versus decentralized. In terms of, let's say, a construction company, would that work? Would that make sense to go that way?
Yes, I think so.
All right, so Julia, you say yes. Timothy, what do you say?
Well, I actually work for a building organisation that has a group of companies, and the boss is the boss, and we do things his way. And although we have different business units, although we can operate them effectively ourselves, we still have to answer to him. So it's a bit hard to say yes or no. I can see the segregation systems, but certainly there's one point of control.
I think, yeah, so long as everybody has a certain amount of say, you know, or a certain amount of input, but ultimately somebody has to be responsible.
All right, so yeah, well, the reason I asked that question is if we look at the industry that we work in, every 8 to 12 years, and we've done a little bit of research on that, every 8 to 12 years the big companies, especially the infrastructure companies, go through a process where they centralize functions and then they decentralize the functions again. You know, so it depends on basically the CEO and the board of directors at that stage that makes those decisions. And it's always interesting for me, you know, not saying one or the other, but it's always interesting to try and break it down into the lowest common denominator, or, you know, the most simple sort of layout, and say, all right, is this going to be logical or not? All right, so I just want to ask a question for Joshua. I can see there's a little bit of a delay on your line. If you can give me an indication, did you want to ask a question at all? Just give me a yes or a no, or if you hit the talk button, just give us an idea. I can also see that Kim is typing up a message for us, so I'll just maybe wait a second or so for that. All right, so Kim has got a nice message. Having worked for the government for a significant part of my working life, government departments do the same thing: centralize, decentralize, centralize, decentralize. Yep, I must say I do agree with that. And it's all about the management flavor of the month. Whoever has got the power, you know, if it's basically a centralist, everything gets centralized. If it's a decentralist, everything gets decentralized. So maybe over the next couple of years, look out for those things and think about this conversation that we had tonight and see what you think about it. All right, so yep, I can see, Josh, you've got a little bit of a delay there, so if you might want to do a type in the chat room, and I'll pick it up from there. All right, so there we go. All right, so no worries, thanks for that. Foreign Affairs, all right, so Bob Carr is in control of that. We'll see how long that lasts. We spoke about the federal election last week and the changes that might come about in that department. But obviously we want somebody in a central position to be in control of that. And then of course the trade, national infrastructure, national highways, all of those types of things we want our federal government to look into. If we now go down to the state government, and this is now where it becomes really colorful because we've got a number of different police forces. Each of the states have different rules. Just driving across the states, they've got different rules for the road as well. So that also creates a little bit of a duplication. The basic rules, obviously, of course, always will remain the same, and that's also spilled down from the federal line. Right, so hospitals, utilities, basic services and protection, we are going to try and keep those in our state hands. If we now think of the local government, EPA, any of those types of things gets done by the locals. Rubbish removal, basically recycling, development approvals, planning approvals, all of those, that gets done by the local city council. And typically they called shires or councils, and you know, alike. And then of course parks and gardens fall under their control as well. If we just go back into history, just added this little slide in there so that you can see that it hasn't been that long. You know, 1931, that's not too long ago that you know, the Statute of Westminster provided for the Parliament to become fully responsible. So it's just before the Second World War broke out, and then of course the last really big change, 1986, when we said, all right, we are no longer going to bound the different states, and the colonial laws therefore will start falling away. And you can see these laws, if you look at the years that they've been in place, it's been a while. Right, so it's been a while that this is coming, and you know, this is how the Australian government, or basically the government's made up of. If we look at the Westminster system, and this is for all of the countries that were part of the old British Empire. I mean, I'm from South Africa and Zimbabwe and all of those places. It's exactly the same over there. It's constitutional monarchy, and of course there's a separation of power. All right, so if we think about the separation of powers, who wants to take a guess on what the separation of powers means? I'm sure most of you guys have already read through the resource material, so you should already have an idea. Any ideas? Who wants to have a go at this? All right, so, yeah, go for it.
No, I was going to say, because you break away from the constitutional monarchy, is a separation of powers. It means that we then have powers that are no longer answerable by the Commonwealth. So that we can have state and local and federal powers. So it gives us the right to make our own laws up.
There we go. All right. So you're halfway there, Timothy. I think that's a good start. Basically, what it comes down to is we've got the legislative part over there. All right. So that's the first one, and then we further split it down into the executive, and of course the last one that we split down into is the judicial part. All right, so now that we know which three areas we've got there, legislative, executive, and judicial, who wants to take a guess at what each of these functions do? what's the role of the legislature? What do they do? What do they basically do? Anybody wants to take a guess at that?
Is that the is that the actual making of the actual laws?
Yep, there we go. So yes, well, Kim, you were right. Yes, definitely, they make the laws. So these guys make stuff, right? So these guys make the stuff. Kent, you said that the administration of legislation falls in there. So yes, we can say, yeah, maybe. Administration actually falls into this area over here. So the executive is responsible for the execution of the laws that we make over there. All right, so these guys make it. These guys enforce it. What do these guys do? They're judicial. What do they do? What's their responsibility? What do they do?
They judge it.
All right, yep, they judge it, and there we go. Kim, you're also correct. They interpret the law, so there we go. And that gives you an idea of the separations of power. All right, so the next one there, what do we say about the responsible government? Do we have a responsible government? What is the definition of a responsible government? Once again, anybody? Is it that we keep them responsible for what they do? Is it parliamentary accountability? What would you say is the responsibility, or what is the definition for a responsible government? All right, so I might just jump in there. It's basically the principle of parliamentary accountability. All right, so that's one of the foundation pieces of the Westminster system. All right, so it means that we have responsibility from our government for the decisions that they take. All right, so we'll talk about that a little bit later on again, and we'll also touch on the rule of law. All right, any questions? Just remember you can add them at any point, or just put up your hand. I'll just maybe put up my hand so that you guys can see how it works. You can put up your hand, and there's a little one that appears next to your name, and I'll know that you want to ask a question. All right, so there we've got somebody that tested the hand signal. Yep, so that definitely worked. If you press it twice, the hand goes down. So, all right, so let's move along. All right, Kent, yes, I saw that. All right. All right, so a constitutional monarchy, this comes back to what we heard earlier on. The head of the state is the Queen. All right, in the old days, before the Queen, it used to be the King. All right, so it hasn't been a king for a while. She's been living really long. And then, you know, obviously, she or you will hold that position rather than by force of arms. All right, so that's basically entrenched in the constitutional arrangements. So even though we sort of still a monarchy, what is the effect of it? How much effective power will the Queen have over business in Australia? Who is in control in Australia? Is it the Queen? Is it the government? Or is it somebody else? Who wants to take a guess at that? So the three answers there is Queen, government, or someone else. All right, so Wayne, yes, go for it.
So the Governor General?
Well,
which is representative of the Queen?
Yeah, the Governor General, she represents the Queen. But yes, does it really, how much influence will the Governor General have on the going on in the government? Is she really managing?
No, I don't think so. I think maybe more the government.
All right, yep, great. All right, so more the government. Who else wants to take a guess at that?
I would have said the government too.
All right. It was a little bit of a, yeah, government. All right. So we leave it at the government. It was a little bit of a nasty question. I wanted to catch you guys out because I think that the government has a role to play, but the mining and infrastructure companies, they definitely also have a lot of influence that they're exerting on where Australia is going. So we might just keep tabs on them and see how they influence the next federal election. All right, so if we think about the introduction of the carbon tax last year when it came out, and the taxes that surround that, there was a bit of a turnaround as soon as the mining companies got upset about that. So yeah, anybody have any other opinions on that?
Thank you. Joshua?
Yes.
Just sorry, mate, just to go back to that responsible government question that you had before. Well, then isn't that I'm sorry, I'm sorry to chuck off track here, but wouldn't it be responsible government? Is that the method they use to or the system to control the government within itself?
All right. So if you just ask that question just ask the question again. It was a little bit faint there. Just ask it again.
Sorry, I'm just going back to that question that you to the previous slide for responsible government.
Oh, okay. So on this one over there, all right.
Yeah, responsible government. So isn't that like the system that the government would use to kind of run itself, because they can sack members in Parliament, they can re-elect members in its own Parliament, so they have to act responsibly to see that Parliament is being run properly.
All right.
Answer that.
So that's a good start. Let's ask Kim. What do you think, Kim? I know you can only type, but you've previously had some really good answers there, and I was actually waiting for you to type something out there. So let's give Kim a while to type that. If we think about the parliamentary accountability, I just want to make sure. There we go. If you can just mute that. The parliamentary accountability, that's one of the building blocks of the government, and then the government is responsible to first, the lower house first has to be satisfied, and then it goes to the upper house. So we'll talk about the lower house and the upper house, basically the parliament, in the next slide on. But yes, it's a good idea that you've got there, that it's a built-in self-control system to make sure that they remain responsible. All right, so we've spoke about that slide for a while. If we look at the separations of powers, we've basically touched on this already. Is everybody clear exactly on what the differences are for each of these functions of government? All right, so what we said is these guys make stuff, these guys apply, and these guys interpret. All right, so there's our three levels that basically comes down to the separation of powers. All right, so when you do that assignment question, make sure that you do cover that in there as well. All right, so I might just do that, and let's just add that again. All right, so any questions up until now on the three levels of government? If we look at the Commonwealth Constitution, and this is now where it gets really interesting. Remember that we spoke earlier on about the lower house and the higher house, or basically the lower house over there is the House of Representatives. How many members do we have there? Any guesses? Who makes up the House of Representatives? I can see Kim is typing a message, so who else wants to venture a go at that answer there? All right, so there's a long chat there. Let's see if we can grab that. All right, so yep, Kim says that she has no idea of the governmental regime in Switzerland. All right, and said voters in Australia, we only have the right to vote and dismiss until the next election, at least anyway. Julia Gillard, with the power of the unions, apparently does go. Brenton, yes, your answer is more or less, well, let's just get the right answer there. It's 150 that we've got in the House of Representatives. That sits over there. How many people, or how many sit in the Senate? Right, so we've got a 150 in the House of Representatives.
70.
Julia? Yep, I'll take the 7. Who wants to guess closer? It's, yep, 75. 75 plus 1 gives us 76. All right, so there we go. We can see there's 76 guys sitting over there. So that gives us the Senate, or basically the Parliament that sits there. All right, yep, Timothy, you're right, 76. Right, and there we go. We can see that the Cabinet has the executive power. Typically, how many ministers do we have in the Cabinet from our Senate? It's roughly between 15 to 20, depending on the type of government that we've got running at that point in time. Right, and there we go. The judicial power, the High Court, sits on top, and of course the other federal courts sits there. Right, so a quick question that you guys can think about for next week is, where will we fit the Court of Appeal? Where do we put the Court of Appeal? Right. Where does that fit into the scheme of things? And I'll leave that question for you guys to think about, and maybe come back at it a little bit later on during the session. All right, so one of the major debates that's been raging for a while, there's been a referendum or two about this as well. Should Australia become a republic? All right, so who says yes and who says no? So you can just say yes or no by adding the little yes or no buttons, or alternatively you can just say no by adding the red cross. All right, so Wayne, you say no. Right, let's see if anybody else says yes. All right, so Julia, you also say no. Who else wants to take a guess at that? All right, Timothy, you also say no. Kim, you're sitting on the fence. Brendan, yes, it might be costly to change over. We might just think about limiting the powers of the Queen. All right, so those are the things that we always think about, and these things always come up closer to federal elections. So I'll leave that slide with you guys for now. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. Yep, no real point changing it. The Queen doesn't really take on any actual authority. I agree with that. And, you know, that's a question that we've been asking for quite some time now. All right, so if we continue onwards, let's have a look at the different roles of government. And yes, Timothy, why would you trust Abbott with an army of his own? Well, we'll talk about that some later. As long as they don't wear Speedos in public, that's all okay with me. Different roles of the government. Let's have a quick look at the different levels that they have. We've spoken about the three, the levels where there's a separation. So from a legislative point of view, planning zones, building controls, all of those things will be part of the government's role as a legislator. All right, so that means that they're responsible for coming up with plans, coming up with the necessary schemes of how the zones fit into each other. If we think about a city like Sydney, for instance, where there's tremendous sprawl, we already see the cost of the sprawl on the infrastructure. Right? The trains and the buses, it becomes really difficult to maintain it. It just becomes too big a network. All right, if we think of the government as a client, basically on the receiving end of infrastructure projects, right? Bridges, roads, dams, desalination plants, any of those would fit into that that scheme there. What role do you think the government has? Do they only sit back and receive these projects, or do they actually take part in the planning as well?
I think, yeah, I think they get involved. Sorry, they get involved. Depending on the project, will depend on their level of involvement. And yeah, like, I mean, the next one's partner, but public-private partnerships, whether whether they get involved in those.
All right, so give me an example of a public-private partnership in Australia.
Hospitals or like road, toll roads, infrastructure.
All right, so we've got hospitals, toll roads, yep. And Timothy, what did you say?
I was going to say hospitals and police stations and schools.
All right, so Brenton, you said prisons as well. So yeah, police stations. What's the deal with police stations? How does it work?
Well, being it's a state item, not so much a federal item. A state item is normally required by the state for infrastructure. You know, the police station will serve for the infrastructure of the state. And that way you have, like when I used to work at project services, we would nominate contractors to come along and we provide them with the plans that we've had partnerships with drafting and designers to come up with the best plan after tender. And then we'd obviously engage a contractor to engage the works, which will always be controlled and supervised by a government representative to completion and afterwards for maintenance purposes.
Okay, is that a real public-private partnership? My understanding of a public-private partnership is, let's have a look at Julia's example of a toll road, for instance. All right, anybody?
Are you looking for additional private PPPs?
Well, no, I'm actually looking at the example that the toll road. How does it work? All right, so if we look at it, there's basically yep, go for it.
Josh, the way I understand, we've got a toll road in Melbourne, and like they invest in the company and get some return in like a period of about 30 years, and we'll get some money back, and so that actually obtain their investment sort of. So in the toll road, so it's a partnership between the government to get the road and the provider so that gets the fund back over a long period of term.
There we go. That's the answer that I was going to look for. So we'll give you a little smiley face over there for that answer. That's exactly what I was looking for. Typically, these public-private partnerships is a deal where there's a private enterprise working with government. The private enterprise takes care of it. Let's look at the toll road. They would typically have it for, say, between 20 and 40 years. And at the end of that period in time, the ownership reverts back to the government. All right, so it needs to be maintained, and that the maintenance and the upkeep of the road comes out of the toll fees. All right,
they take on the responsibility and the risk, but Brenton just made a point about the Clem 7 and the airport link, and those are ones where I believe that they're reverting back to or government's having to bail them out because they've gone broke.
Yeah. Okay. So the Clem 7 and the airport link, those are. I mean, when those projects started, I think they were going to be $7 toll fee to use that, and and that went down to $4, went down to $2, and it was the resistance of people not wanting to use it because it was deemed to be just too expensive. So all of those factors played a part. Doing business in Queensland seems to be more difficult than any of the other states. Who would agree with that statement?
I can't say for sure because I've never worked anywhere else.
All right.
Josh, I think I can answer that. Living in Melbourne, it's just due to population growth is so massive. Like the toll roads get used so much, so we're really forced into that situation only because we've got no other option.
Well, if you really look at it, it's not a bad option. If we look at government, if you look at Australia in a whole, how big it is, and there's only 25 million people living here, and if you look at the area of the area that we basically have to maintain, it's not going to happen just by the government. So these partnerships work really well, and it's one of the solutions. I actually think that there's a lot of scope for more of these public-private partnerships, and that it's not being used enough, it's not being exploited enough. Yeah,
too many people think that the private sector shouldn't benefit from, shouldn't have such a say in such big developments.
All right.
So my readings have shown so far.
Sometimes let's try and I want to write something on the board here, and it doesn't want to allow me to do it. So profit is not a dirty word. All right, so profit is not a dirty word. Who agrees with that? Why do you think construction companies are in business? If we really look at it, are they in business just to keep people occupied, or are they in the game to really start making money? It's like any other business, Kent.
Any other business other than a non-for-profit organisation.
Yes, non-for-profit organisation. But if we look at that, the government is basically a huge not-for-profit organisation, and sometimes they might need a little bit of help. So what we're basically doing is we're stirring the pot. I'm getting you guys to think a little bit about this, and we might talk about that again during a later session. All right. So. Are you guys okay? Can we move off from the public-private partnerships? If you can give me a yes or a no, I'll just clear that. Yep, just a yes or a no. Kim, yep. All right, so let's move on and think about the regulator. All right, so that's an easy one for us. They basically evaluate and approve projects. All right, so that's simple. They stamp out a lot of illegal activities, and they're responsible for making sure that we maintain standards. Right? So there's a little bit of a detective function that they have to do. If we think about the government as a contractor, all right, so what do we see about the government as a contractor? They basically provide infrastructure, big roads, bridges, things like that, and of course desalination plants in some of the states. That's also interesting to see how that project is going. What else? Where else will the government feature as a contractor? And I might just delete these notes that we've made so that we have some more space to write. All right, who wants to take a go at the government as a contractor? All right, so Kent, the question is, give us an example of the government as a contractor. We know that they provide infrastructure and they do a few big projects. What else will the government do? Anyone? We know that they're responsible for a lot of the social services. We know that they provide safety, and all of these are sort of soft issues that we don't really want to see at this specific point. But I'll leave this question with you so that you can think about it some more. All right, this one is part of the assessment item as well. All right, and then of course our designer, the function that we see our government taking part. If we think about the different types of procurement functions that we have, the different types of strategies, both EPC and EPCM, you'll see that government is now taking a more enlightened role in design. All right, so we can see that there's, we heard earlier on tonight that the government is always part of the design team because they sort of have an idea of what they want to achieve. How they get there isn't always clear. All right, so they make sure that they employ people that do know how to do it, pay the premium for that, and get the job done. All right, so those are the different roles of the government. I can see Zane. Zane has just joined us. Welcome, Zane. It's nice to have you on board. While I've got all of you guys here, Zane last week asked us if we want to maybe move the time. You guys must just think about it. If you're really serious about moving the time forwards another hour or so, just start a conversation on the chat room or the question and answers forum, and we'll have a look at that as long as everybody agrees, okay? All right, so let's have a look at the government as a client. And what I've done here is I've given you a few different figures, basically 2004, 2005, then I'll skip a few years. And there's a specific reason for me to skip those years. And let's just call it the global financial crisis. Sits somewhere in the middle there. So we don't really have good figures in there. It would have been interesting. I might have just included it. But in any case, this is what we've got. The residential work done 2004 to 2005. You can see there's a big increase between those 2 years over there. However, the difference between 2010 and 2011 is almost nothing. All right, so it's only a small, minuscule difference there. We can see the market is slowing down a little bit. Who wants to take a venture? Why are we not spending money at the moment? Why is the government not spending money on residential projects? Is it because they are waiting for the next federal election? Is it because they're trying to get the budget deficit back to zero? What do you guys think?
Because I think at this stage, are they trying to promote some spending because it's slowed down so much publicly that if they start putting works into residential work, that'll just kill the market full stop?
All right, yep, that might be a good starting point. Yep, they might not want to encourage too much spending.
Oh no, sorry, I kind of got a bit confused there, Joshua. Yeah, obviously they would like more work to be done on the country, I guess.
Okay, that sounds better. All right, Kim, you reckon that the resource sector boom might have an influence on that? If we look at that one there, engineering and construction work, that sort of runs closely aligned with the resource sector boom. We can see there that there's actually a little bit of a decline this last year. My venture would be to see that, or would be to say that, you know, everybody is taking on a wait and see approach at the moment, and see what's happening with the global economy. If you think about what's happened to the euro, the EU, and Greece, and all of those places, you know, obviously. There's a bit of a slowdown. Everybody's just waiting to see if it's going to stabilize. In the States, we saw a crash in the market as well, so that also influenced it. If we look at the non-residential work, also the difference there is almost zero. That one is also almost zero. That one has actually went down, and that one as well. So the non-residential construction work has gone down. Interesting stuff. So it might be worth your while to go and try and interpret these figures and see if you can come up with a good reason for this to happen. Alright, so if we move on and we say the government has a designer and a contractor. Now, quite recently we had those BER projects in 2010. Is there anybody that was involved in the BER projects that might want to share their opinion of those projects, or anybody actually? Who wants to share an opinion of that? Benton, I can see, yep. So you want to grab a mic and talk a little bit about that?
Just what I found with the schools that I was visiting, which is sort of Bundaberg region and out west of that area. The schools definitely needed the government finances input, which was handy. However, I believe that the BR came too early. There was still plenty of projects on, so the local contractors that were actually doing the work were quite expensive. And the other point was there was only 2 or 3 that were qualified PQC rated sufficiently to do the work, and we found quite regularly there was collusion where they'd all be sitting down the pub and only one of them would end up tendering on the job, or the others would pull out at the last minute, which was quite disappointing because the schools, I think, could have done with more bang for their buck.
All right, thanks for that. Why do you think that project came to an end so abruptly? Or that initiative, rather?
Was it a change in government?
Oh, that might be the reason. What do you, Brenton, an idea from you? Have you got an idea why that project came to an end, or the initiative? Was it because of a change in government?
Well, Julia was actually running the education department when the BER came in, and that was Ruddy's call that she was running environment education, from what I remember. I think it came abruptly because it was starting to get a bad name, that it was costing a fortune. The minimum build requirements that the government was putting on, some of these schools just was getting expensive, and so the negative press against it was causing a backlash against what they originally thought would have been a huge winner. You wouldn't have thought it could really go wrong giving money to kids, but apparently it can.
Well, it's that's a good point. It's interesting to see how quickly the things can go wrong. So we've got a few comments there in the chat window. Firstly, we've got one from Kim that says not so much different to the major capital injection of the 70s. Yep, it seems that we do this every now and again, exactly like Brenton has just said. And then, of course, nation building kicked off in 2010. Timothy, do you want to expand on that one there? You've got me there. Have you got an idea of? Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, there was a federal injection of funds because they were fearful after the global collapse that Australia also wanted to make sure that they kind of had to jump on this. So I think because I know I was a superintendent's rep for the nation building program. As part of a $3 billion injection into the building industry, where we build a lot of Class 2 dwellings and what have you for people who were either low income or had disability services. So there's a lot of 1428 work going on, Australian Standard 1428 compliance. And the whole idea of that was to get a lot of adaptable housing done, and protective care housing done, especially through Central Queensland just alone. But this happened through all of this state and also other states.
All right. So did you say AS 1428?
Yeah, 1428.1, 2001 at the time. Yeah, then it just changed. Some of the it ended for I think 1428.1 2001 and also 2009. So there's a lot of it's still the same Australian standard though. But there's a lot of needs for compliance for people with adaptable needs. But it was generally just public housing. That was the main portion of it.
All right. So just correct me if I'm wrong. 1428. That's disability, eh?
Yep, yeah, that's right.
Okay, cool. All right. Yep. All right. Yeah, interesting times. Julia, yeah, we know you're in that space. 1428. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff happening in the next couple of years. You know, yeah, everybody.
There is at the moment, and there will continue to be for quite a while yet.
Mm-hmm. It's a very topical sort of topic at the moment, and it's out there. So we'll see what the government does with it. Strangely enough, if you look at the railway stations around New South Wales, and apparently some in Brisbane as well, they are not compliant. People have to travel to the next train station to get to a lift in order to move off from one platform to the next. Yes, so I just read an article the other day, actually on Facebook of all places. Somebody complained about having to do that. So yeah.
Just from our perspective, we're actually involved in auditing a number of train stations for the Department of Transport in New South Wales, and coming up with and there's new rail links. I don't know. I think it's the Northwest Rail Link.
That's right.
that yeah, we're getting fairly heavily involved in that, and then new links up here in Queensland, and the upgrade of a number of existing train stations, putting in lifts and the like to make them much more accessible.
Well, if we think about what's happened in the press just this week, Railcorp is getting rid of, I don't know how many hundreds of people working for them. Yeah, and that new rail line that's going into Castle Hill there, they've been talking for a while about that, and I think did they say 2020 or 2024? I can't remember what the due date is for that. Zane, I can see you typing up a message there, so hopefully you can give us a little bit of feedback into that. All right, so interesting times. Let's move on from this slide. This is basically just 2 slides that I wanted to share with you guys. It's a section in the study guide or the resource material that you can read through. Science and technology. In our industry, there's not a lot happening in terms of new development, in terms of technology moving forward. So these organizations are there to try and get the wheel rolling. So I think the most well-known there is Sara. They are specifically responsible for industrial research. CTU recently acquired the CSIRO facility in Rockhampton, so we're quite pleased with that. They moved out now defunct, so we've got a nice new research center. So those of you guys who live in the area, you should come and see it. It's opposite the road to the main campus, quite a nice site there. And then of course the CRC, they're responsible for a number of collaborative research centers between, specifically in our field, infrastructure, so railway lines, bridges, big roads, and one that came up last week. If any of you guys are interested in low-cost, fast-direct housing, that's one of the ones that we're looking at. It came in last week. So if you're interested in that space, specifically if you work for a company like ATCO, that would be right down your alley. Just let me know. Competitiveness, how do we develop it? So basically we try and stimulate it by making sure that our systems and our laws sort of ensure that we do the same thing the same way all over. The Building Code of Australia, or the National Construction Code, is responsible for making sure that we maintain those standards across Australia. Who enjoys reading the DCA? Anybody? You can say yes or no just by choosing the little yes or no buttons. Kent, yep, not you. Yeah, if you have a hard copy, it's much easier to read it. You can make notes on it. Yep, I also find it's really painful to read.
It's only fun because you can pick, when you pick the bits out that don't make sense or don't, there's not enough clarification or something like that.
Well, the university recently employed a new platform for the BCA, so I'm not sure if you guys have tried accessing it. If it's more user-friendly or less user-friendly, for me it's always the same. I struggle to get the information that I want, and my laptop turns into a time monster the moment I go into the BCA website. So yeah, I hope you guys have the same. Yes, Anthony, it is like the Bible for the building surveyors. You guys, well, we might have a little quiz on that at the end of the term, just to make sure that you guys are all fluent in that. All right, so there's a few ideas that I've got there: multinational endeavors and exploration, organizations doing business in Australia from overseas. We can see there's a lot of interest from China as well in Australia. They've got different reasons for being interested. Typically the resources might be the main reason for them to be interested in Australia. So we just make sure that we keep tabs on them. All right, and then that's basically all that I wanted to cover for tonight. As I said, we were going to do a quick session. It turned out to be a normal session, but that's good. We like the chats and everything. Who's got questions or suggestions for next week? And this would be where you either type it into the screen or just hit the talk button. All right, so Zane, you go first. If you hit the talk button, share your ideas with us. All right, Zane, you said that you had a question. Well, if not, doesn't matter. Anybody else? Which topic is it next week? Next week we start looking at the professional organizations in the industry, and we start looking at the different structures that we see, why it's important to ensure that your business is run according to the type of industry that you're in. So that would be the wide area that we're going to look at. We're just about scratching onto topic number 2 in your study guide, Timothy. So if you go and have a look at that, those are the areas that we are going to cover next week. And of course, anything, if there's anything additional that you think we want to talk about, even if it's not related to the course, just put it up onto the question and answer forum, and I'll make sure that we cover it next week. Also, if you guys need additional sessions, I'm quite willing to do that, additional sessions for you. There's an open chat room on the website at the moment. It's called the Tea Room, and that Tea Room is always open, so you guys can use it at any time. And it's basically the same as what we've got here. It's exactly the same. I've made all of you moderators. That means that you can go in there and control the site and you know, work on group assignments if you need, or discuss anything with your colleagues. All right, and Ken, any other notes? Oh, on another note, any feedback we can get from the weekly A4 questions, or you've just not seen it. All right, so what I do for those weekly questions, I would typically rate your question, Kent, and you'll see basically at the end of your question, if you go back into that forum, there'll be a number, and it will be a number less than 10, so it will be 1 through to 10. And that's an indication of if I thought it was a good response that you gave. If I think that it warrants a little bit of feedback, you'll see that I'll add a little sentence in there. So if you guys want, I might just share the screen with you and see if I can get that going. Let's see if I can share. All right, so there's our Moodle website that we've got for building sector management. So if we look at the first one there, let's see, we've got the participant introductions, and there's one new one that I haven't seen before. So typically, let's have a quick look at the feedback that I typically would give for this. All right, so if there's feedback, this might not be a good example because of this is just introductions. All right, so there you can see there's one that I gave a little bit of feedback to Wayne. Wayne introduced himself, and I also said that, you know, I'm a biking enthusiast, and and you can see there's the 10 out of 10 that he got for that one. That maximum rating over there. So you guys can go back into the forums and just get some feedback on what you've done. I think the easiest way for you to do it is go in, paste your answer, and then go and have a cup of tea, maybe have some dinner, wait 30 minutes, and then come back again to see the other posts. Because it's a question and answer database, you have to actually respond before you can see the other students' posts. So let's see if I've got another example over here. And there you can see there's the ratings that I've given based on reading your assessment. All right, so remember these assessments are typically, it's just a way of engaging, so you won't get tremendous feedback onto it, but that's what I can give you at that stage. All right, so let's just, I just need to catch up with all the questions now. All right, so the number, Brenton has asked a question, what's the number in brackets? Brenton, the number in brackets I discovered today is a reference to the number of people that's actually graded your feedback. So because it's only myself that's grading the feedback, that number will always be 1. And as soon as I start employing somebody else to help me with the work, that number will go up as well. All right, so that answers that. All right, any other questions from anybody?
No, I'm all good. Thanks, Josh.
All right, great stuff. Thanks again. Thanks, everybody. All right, so I'll see you guys again next week. Zane, if you want to, send me an email. I'm not sure if you've got audio.
Yeah, I'll work it out.
Oh, okay, cool. So there we go. All right, so welcome to the session. Thanks, Joshua. I know that you've had some difficulties coming in and out, so thanks for persisting. And I'll see all of you guys next week, same time, same place. All right. Thanks, Anthony.
Excellent.
Okay, Kim, you are not blind. It might just be that I've not given you feedback yet. I'll have a double check on it, and I'll send you a little personal email just to let you know that I've graded your work. All right. Okay, great stuff. All right, so there we go. Everything seems to be okay, and I'll see you guys next week.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Josh.
All right, see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Josh. Bye.
Bye.